Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm speaking today on the Warner Brothers Employment Relations Amendment Bill. I'm speaking today to the Warner Brothers Parliament, sponsored by Warner Brothers, a Parliament who now is in session under the instruction of Warner Brothers, so that we can pass legislation in urgency for the benefit of the multinational corporation called Warner Brothers. Mr. Speaker, the Green Party is very pleased that The Hobbit is in New Zealand. The Green Party is very pleased that we have kept The Hobbit in New Zealand, but we don't believe that it was necessary for the New Zealand government, the National Party, to give away our sovereignty in order to keep The Hobbit in New Zealand. The National Party have compromised the sovereignty of New Zealand, have compromised the sovereignty of this Parliament in order to satisfy the whims of the multinational corporation called Warner Brothers. Mr. Speaker, this Parliament is now the Warner Brothers Parliament. This Parliament, the majority in this Parliament, are now voting literally under the instructions of the executive of Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers are giving clear directions to the majority, the National Party and no doubt ACT Party majority, who have come into this House today in order to vote for a bill written on behalf of Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers executives and lawyers did the drafting on this legislation. Warner Brothers executives have been involved in giving the direction to the New Zealand government in order to pass this legislation. This is a shameful day for what used to be called the National Party, but is now called the Warner Brothers National Party. It used to be called the National Party, but now sponsored by Warner Brothers. The Warner Brothers National Party is passing a piece of legislation through this House at the behest of Warner Brothers.
Point of order, Chris Tremaine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to bring to the attention of the House what the Speaker is doing. Understanding orders, he's unable to imply that members or convey that members of this House are under the influence of members from outside this House. Can I ask you?
Point of order. Yeah, speaking to the point of order on a trivial matter.
Speaker, I think it's long been the case that there's been an ability to refer to parties in this way. So, I don't think there's been any suggestion, certainly no direct suggestion of corruption on the part of Mr. Norman, as was implied by Mr. Tremaine. I think Mr. Tremaine might have brought attention to it, and no one's suggesting. For example, that that point of order was sponsored by Wingnut or anything similar to that.
I'll hear the member.
Under 52 Speaker's Order 52.1, the member has been implying that it's been under the direction of Warner Brothers, which he cannot do.
Yeah. No, I don't need any. I'm on my feet. Look, this is a robust debate, and in order to breach Speaker's ruling on page 51, and there are two or three, I don't believe the member has done that. I mean, he's skirting with a notion of being, I think, quite colourful, but it has to be quite a significant statement to have breached Speaker's rulings on 51. But I have been listening very carefully, and I will continue to listen carefully, and I just caution the member, he's on the bevel, shall we say.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are speaking today about the Warner Brothers Employment Relations Film Production Work Amendment Bill. The Warner Brothers Bill, it's sponsored by the Warner Brothers, who have been promoting the language in this bill, and it's being promoted in this House by the National Party, which I have been calling the Warner Brothers National Party because they seem to be promoting a bill that is to the benefit of the Warner Brothers. And it's for that reason. Here we are under urgency. Now think about it. Here we are, we've got the entire New Zealand Parliament operating under urgency in order to satisfy the demands of a multinational corporation called Warner Brothers. This is a very sad day for this Parliament. Around us on these walls we have the names of battles that were fought in order to protect the sovereignty of this country. Around us on this wall we had people that gave their lives to protect sovereignty, and here is a government, the National Party government, working under the instructions of Warner Brothers that is introducing a bill into this House that contravenes our sovereignty.
Thank you. Honourable Dr. Wayne Matt.
Mr Speaker, I refer to page 52, para 1. It is, and I quote directly, it is not an order to say the government or a member has been dominated, has received instructions from or has received directions from. The word instruction was actually used in that particular part of it. Yeah, so I believe he actually has strayed beyond what is appropriate.
Yeah, I did caution the member he was on the slope or the bevel, and both 52(1) and 2 do state quite clearly that you cannot accuse a party or a member of taking instruction from outside the House. And so in that respect, if the member used those words, and I believe he did cross that line. So I just caution the member, he's dancing on a bit of a pinhead here, and I will pull him up if he crosses. He has done so. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Here we stand in this Parliament acting under urgency that the government has introduced in this House, the National Party. Now I have, for the sake of demonstrating the problem here, called it the Warner Brothers National Party. Now I am not suggesting that the National Party is corrupt, and so I'm not suggesting that at all, Mr Speaker. What I'm suggesting is that we in this House today have been called together because Warner Brothers want us to pass this bill. Now I'm not suggesting the National Party or any particular member is acting under the instruction of the Warner Brothers. What I'm suggesting is that they are actually worked with Warner Brothers so that we have before us tonight this bill and we're acting under urgency. Now, is that really why all the people on these walls around us fought wars to protect the sovereignty of this country? Is this really why we fought to have parliamentary democracy in our country so that a multinational corporation, Warner Brothers, can effectively write the law of this country? Is that what it's all about? Is that what it's come to? In 2010, after all of these years, all of these struggles to protect our democracy, to protect our sovereignty, here we are today on the behest of Warner Brothers, who have been promoting this legislation. We are acting under urgency to put forward legislation that suits them. Mr Speaker, the second point I want to talk about is the so-called great negotiating strategy of the government and the National Party. Now, if we are to accept Warner Brothers on the face of it, they said that industrial relations was an issue for them. Now, the CTU and the unions came out and said, we guarantee there will not be industrial action. Now, if the government was acting in the best interests of New Zealand, if the government was acting in the best interests of New Zealand in this negotiation between Warner's and New Zealand Inc., then the Prime Minister would have come out and said, I accept the word of the trade union movement, I accept that there will not be industrial action, in order to maximise the negotiating position of the New Zealand government. Because if we wanted to maximise our negotiating position in the negotiations with Warner's, then we would have accepted the word of the trade union movement. The Prime Minister would have come out and said, I accept that there will not be industrial action, which would have undermined the negotiating position of Warner's. The Prime Minister did the exact opposite. The Prime Minister came out and said, I do not trust the word of the trade union movement. I do not believe what they're saying. By doing that, he made it easier for Warner's, right? So in a negotiating between the Prime Minister, representing New Zealand, and Warner's, the Prime Minister was on the side of Warner's. So instead of being on the side of New Zealand Inc., the Prime Minister was negotiating on the side of Warner's by saying, I accept that there won't be industrial peace, I don't believe the word of the trade union movement. By doing that, he made it easier for Warner's in the negotiation. There was a negotiation between New Zealand and Warner Brothers in which the Prime Minister was on the side of Warner Brothers because he was saying, I do not accept the word of the trade union movement. Now, if we accept Warner Brothers' argument that industrial legislation was one of the things that was on the table, that was one of the negotiating points on the table, surely the government representing New Zealand should try to get the maximum best outcome for New Zealand. Instead, the Prime Minister actually was helping Warner Brothers' position in the negotiation when he said, I don't accept the word of the trade union movement that there will be industrial peace. That is a fundamentally ridiculous negotiating strategy if you have the best interests of New Zealand Inc. at heart. It doesn't make any sense to argue a case that helps Warner Brothers' position. The Prime Minister argued a case that helped Warner Brothers' position during this negotiation. We don't know how much that's cost us, so the whole